Just listened to Dawn Butler, and I've never heard so much nonsense in all my life. This is just typical Labour narratives all over again. I had to shut my business down. And I'm sorry, Dawn, you're talking rubbish. You shouldn't be paying a 17-year-old the same rate as someone who is 25.
Hello everyone, welcome to Julian Discourse. In this clip, that socialist house of cards collapses on live television. Watch what happens when Labour MP Dawn Butler tries to defend their disastrous new budget, only to get completely dismantled by a local small business owner who was forced to shut his doors because of it. When elite theory collides with working class reality, the spin instantly falls apart. Hit subscribe and let's get into it.
No, I think we're all fooling ourselves. You know, Alan Milburn, former Labour minister, very hard-hitting report. The one that says £25 is spent on benefits for each young person against £1 on trying to find them or create a job. But it all comes down to Rachel Reeves and her policies as Chancellor. She's made young people virtually unemployable in this country. Talk to anybody who runs a business in hospitality, a pub, a restaurant, a racecourse meeting. They cannot employ young people anymore.
Because of the minimum wage?
Because of the minimum wage, because of the increase in national insurance. Why would you employ somebody as young as 18 or 19 when you're paying the same taxes on them for a person of 24 or 25? I know from pubs I go to, from restaurants, you talk to anybody who runs a business, I'm sorry, the door is closed to young people because they are simply too expensive to employ in this country. And Dawn, if you were a former minister in that area, you surely can't disagree that the conditions for the employment of teenagers is just not there in this country. I had a job when I was 13 and had one ever since.
Well, yeah, you can't, Dawn, that's the thing. You can't go to the local newsagent and say, can I be a paper boy?
You can't.
Well, no one reads newspapers anymore because they get it all online. But even if they did, if you want to undercut the other paper boys, which you should be able to do, you should be able to say, I'll do a round for £5 just to get some experience. You're not allowed to do that.
So, yes, there are those entry-level jobs for young people that are not there anymore, a lot of them. But
And why?
But exploiting young people, it was not the answer to the problem, right? Having young people, because, you know, young people, if you're not living at home, you know, they're paying rent. They deserve to be paid a rate for a job that everybody else is being paid.
But if there's no job...
If you like, that's my left-wing credentials as a trade union.
Yeah, because
trade union.
Well, she's right, Mike, and you can't let employers use young people to undercut existing staff.
Of course you can't, but there were rules and regulations around even before Rachel Reeves decided to up the ante to the employer.
But there were variations
right? but there were safe marks. Children were... I mean, you're talking as though we still put people up chimneys, you know, children up chimneys in this country. There were regulations about how much you had to pay young people, and then young people get a job. Now the regulations have been pushed so high in taxation,
I'm not sure
there are no jobs.
I don't know if Dawn agrees. Do you agree that a 17-year-old on the minimum wage should be paid as much as a 22-year-old on the minimum wage?
I think that it's about fairness, right? If that 17-year-old, yes, I think...
So you do?
I think people should
Because
be
they're trying to equalise it.
So yes, people should be paid a rate for the job.
Yeah, but
no matter who
there's
you
no
are.
job. There's no job. That's the thing. So the 17-year-old is getting a higher minimum wage. I understand that's the policy. But the unintended consequence is that the employer says, well, I might as well take the 25-year-old.
Exactly. There isn't, the 22-year-old, right, can run the bar because they've been there for 5 years. The 17-year-old can't. But you're expected to pay them the same rate to stand behind the bar for 10 hours and serve customers.
How long will it take the 17-year-old to develop the skills to run a bar? 2
or 3 years.
But you're saying 25-year-olds, so that's 8 years. Right, so you're saying that 17-year-old...
What's 8 years?
But 17 to 25 is 8 years, right? So you're saying that 17-year-old should be underpaid for 8 years?
No, what I'm saying is, in any industry, if you're in a training capacity and you're learning, then the cost of being given those new skills means you should not be paid as much as the person who's got the skills.
If you're doing an apprenticeship with this
we don't have apprenticeships anymore.
But we do. We have 200,000. This government made the announcement.
Let's get some calls.
We have 200,000.
Yes, of course.
I don't see them, honestly.
Well, yeah, but
you won't
they can
see
still
them, will you?
there are things you can't see which still exist, Mike, like wind.
Well, I don't see apprenticeships advertised all over the place.
No,
Come
all right.
here, be
Well,
a trainee
the
plumber.
issue, a lot of people who run apprenticeships say they get a young person in and they're so shocked by having to work, they don't come back the next day. They're so shocked by work.
Well, I'm
Paul
afraid
in
that's
Kent,
the work
hello.
culture.
Hi, Paul.
Good morning, Jeremy.
What do you
Hi,
think?
Jeremy. Hi,
Who's
team.
done this thing? Young people are really being hung out to dry here.
Well, I've just listened to Dawn Butler, and I've never heard so much nonsense in all my life. This is just typical Labour narrative all over again. I had to shut my business down. All I had was a small little cafe in Kent, and I closed it down because I couldn't afford to keep paying the bills or the kids that I employed. I put a job vacancy out just for someone to come in and help on a couple of days a week. I got 74 applicants. Most of them were like 15, 16, 17, 18. And I'm sorry, Dawn, you're talking rubbish. You shouldn't be paying a 17-year-old the same rate as someone who's 25. It shouldn't happen.
That's the issue. But I wonder whether, Paul, in defence of Labour, I wonder whether they saw this coming. It's possible he didn't think about it.
But,
of course they didn't think about it. They didn't think about a lot of things.
All right,
they didn't
but
think about all
let
the
Dawn
U-turns
answer, Paul.
they've done.
I'm sorry you had to close your business, Paul. So are you saying that because you couldn't... How much were you paying people? And is it because you had to pay... Is it because you had to pay them more money than you had to close your business? Was that the sole reason?
I had to pay one lad who was 17 exactly the same amount of money as somebody who was 62. And I couldn't afford to pay the wages. It wasn't just the wages, it was to clump on the national insurance, it was to clump on the hike of the pensions contributions, it was NIC3, it was the fact of the cafe. I have to charge everybody 20% VAT, but I don't claim VAT back because there's no VAT on food.
Out of interest, one of the things I've heard
is, big time.
Paul, when you pay the 17-year-old the same as the 62-year-old, my understanding is the other thing that happens is the 62-year-old asks you for a pay rise. Is that right?
Absolutely. 100%.
That's all of this seems to be unintended. Irene is in Ayrshire. Hello, Irene.
Hello.
What do you think of what's going on? Is there a crisis here?
Definitely. And it's not just the Labour, it's the full government. It's letting the children down.
What should be done, do you think, Irene?
More apprenticeships. They don't need to get a adult's wage. More apprenticeships. Bring youth training schemes back. That's my opinion. My granddaughter's mental health suffers through not getting a job. She's travelled 20-odd miles for interviews. She's travelled out of town for interviews. And because she lives in a rural area, they hit her with, can you travel? In Scotland, between the age of 5 and 22, they have free bus passes. Of course, my granddaughter can travel. She has travelled everywhere for interviews.
Yeah. It sounds like she really wants a job badly. She got one yet, Irene, or not?
No, she hasn't. Hasn't.
Tough.
She's been for about 11, 12 interviews since she left the school in December. And they keep... she goes mild and they say, no, you can't. Can you travel? Yes, I can travel. OK, we'll get back to you. She went for an apprenticeship in a dental in the next town and was told somebody would get back to her within a couple of days. She never heard a thing. Yeah. Nobody's interested.
Thanks, Irene. I spoke to somebody yesterday who got a job in computer science, which he'd studied at university for. 500 applications.
Yeah.
You know, there is a very specific silence that falls over a progressive politician when their theoretical worldview collides with a literal, real-world victim of their own policies. When Dawn Butler sat in that studio reciting generic Labour talking points about fairness, she was completely unprepared for Paul. He didn't bring academic theories. He brought the stark reality of a small cafe in Kent forced to board up its windows because of Labour's economic radicalism. When Paul explained he had to close his doors because he legally could not afford to hire the 74 teenagers desperate for work, Butler had no answer. The modern left sits in the insulated halls of Westminster and genuinely believes they can decree higher wages and mandate new taxes without any consequences. To understand the economic devastation working-class families are dealing with today in 2026, look at the timeline. In July 2024, Labour promised to protect working people. But on October 30th, 2024, Chancellor Rachel Reeves delivered an autumn budget that essentially declared war on small businesses. She slammed employers with a massive national insurance hike and flattened the minimum wage structure, mandating that an inexperienced 17-year-old be paid the same premium rate as a 25-year-old. In a progressive think tank, that's called fairness. In the real world, it's an economic death sentence. You don't magically lift that teenager out of poverty. You simply make them legally unemployable. That is exactly what Irene, the grandmother on the call, was desperately trying to explain. Her granddaughter is getting rejected everywhere because Labour legislated the entry-level job completely out of existence. The elite left views small businesses as bottomless piggy banks to be raided by the state. But as Paul's empty cafe proves, the piggy bank eventually empties. You cannot mandate prosperity from a government office. And when politicians prioritize ideological fairness over economic reality, the working class always pays the price. Thanks for watching Julian Discourse. Hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and I'll see you in the next one.